Behind the grandeur of Buckingham Palace lies a battlefield, not of swords, but of secrets, silences, and power plays. When Catherine entered the royal arena, not everyone was ready to kneel, and those who didn't were about to face Anne. The crown doesn't forget disobedience, and neither does the Princess Royal. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Beneath the surface of a perfectly curated royal image, cracks had already begun to spread like hairline fractures across a porcelain facade. As King Charles's public role diminished and his appearances became sparse, a quiet vacuum emerged. And in that vacuum, rival forces stirred. The Old Guard, a term whispered with pride among Camilla's fiercely loyal staff, believed themselves to be the rightful guardians of royal continuity. They had supported Camilla long before she wore the Queen's crown, long before public forgiveness softened scandal into sympathy. And they were not ready to surrender that power, especially not to Catherine, whose rise threatened to eclipse the Queen herself. Within these shadowed hallways, a silent standoff brewed. Catherine, ever graceful, ever composed, was met with cold glances, protocol breaches, and a wall of indifference. A bow withheld may seem trivial, but in the royal world, it is an act of defiance sharper than any dagger. While the cameras focused on smiles and ceremony, behind the scenes, Catherine endured these quiet humiliations with a dignity that spoke volumes. But one pair of eyes missed nothing. Anne, the Princess Royal veteran of duty, guardian of protocol, and a woman forged in fire, watched with growing unease. She'd seen enough. Whispers reached her ears. Staff ignoring Catherine's instructions, subtle slights in seating charts, titles misused in private correspondence. It wasn't just impudence, it was sabotage, and Anne was no bystander. Declarations or dramatic confrontations, she began preparing her next move. Because in the House of Windsor, justice doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes, it arrives with silence and a sword hidden in tradition. But what appeared to be a minor act of defiance was about to detonate a royal reckoning that no one saw coming. They weren't just employees, they were Camilla's inner circle, trained in discretion, loyal beyond reason. But when these aides refused to bow to Catherine, they crossed an invisible line that would turn them from palace servants into palace threats. Their loyalty to Queen Camilla wasn't simply professional, it was personal, deep-rooted, and immovable. Many had walked with her through the darkest corridors of royal scandal, weathered the storm of public rejection, and helped her survive the shadow cast by Diana's legacy. These were not passive attendants. They were gatekeepers of her dignity. Their purpose was clear: shield the Queen from embarrassment, control access, and most of all, preserve a silent wall between Camilla's world and anyone who might challenge her authority, including, now, the Princess of Wales. In hushed whispers within palace halls, they began to refer to Catherine not as an equal, but as an outsider. And then came the moment that turned quiet tension into outright defiance. A public engagement, formal, structured, scripted to the last second. And yet, when Catherine approached, the expected bow never came. Not from one, not from several. A deliberate act, timed, intentional, and witnessed by those who knew precisely what it meant. In a world where protocol is religion, this was heresy. Catherine's composure didn't crack, but to those who could read beyond smiles and postures, the humiliation was sharp, piercing, and undeniable. The air around her shifted. Something sacred had been violated. The message was clear. This inner circle didn't acknowledge her rising star. They didn't see her as future queen, but as a threat to the throne they had spent years fortifying for Camilla. And among the silent crowd stood Anne. She didn't speak. She didn't flinch. But her expression was carved in ice. In that moment, she understood the weight of what had occurred. This wasn't a slip of etiquette, it was a calculated warning, and it would not go unanswered, because Anne, though silent, held the ancestral weight of royal duty on her shoulders. Her eyes scanned the faces of those who had dared to cross the line. She made no scene. She made no spectacle, but her mind had already begun to turn. In the Princess Royal's world, There is no tolerance for rebellion, not when it shames the institution, not when it wounds the future queen, and certainly not when it unfolds in the full glare of the public. But Anne wasn't just going to scold them, she was going to make an example out of them. Anne doesn't waste time. She doesn't need permission. And when tradition is at stake, she doesn't hesitate. With military precision, she launched a private investigation that would shake even Camilla's most protected allies. In the quiet aftermath of the bowing incident, Anne retreated not out of defeat, but calculation. She understood the cost of confrontation in public, the risk of scandal erupting before control was established. So, instead of going to war with headlines, she turned to the arsenal no one saw: her influence. Anne's position within the royal machine was unlike anyone else's. Unshakable. Senior in rank, unimpeachable in reputation, and utterly fearless in execution. While others treaded lightly through the maze of royal protocol, Anne moved like a soldier, silent, focused, and deadly in her resolve. She summoned no press. She issued no statements. But behind the palace walls, the machinery of her quiet probe began turning. Her allies were not loud or flashy. They were the lifeblood of tradition equerries, senior courtiers, old retainers whose loyalty was not to individuals, but to the crown itself. These seasoned figures understood the gravity of Anne's nod. They moved in silence, questioning junior staff, analyzing schedules, flagging discrepancies. What began as whispers of impropriety soon spiraled into a damning pattern. Repeated breaches, misuse of precedents, disregard for ceremonial orders. In the language of the palace, these were not minor errors, they were calculated acts of sabotage. From event logs to behind-the-scenes chatter, it became clear that Catherine's marginalization wasn't incidental. It had been coordinated. And those at the heart of it were still under Camilla's wing. Anne said nothing. She kept smiling through engagements, nodding politely at Camilla, maintaining an unshakable front. But those closest to her noted a change. Her expressions had grown stiller, her words more clipped, and her gaze cold steel. Camilla too began to notice the shift. Conversations between them grew shorter, lingered longer. A shared tension built between their offices like a tightening rope. Camilla's instincts, long sharpened by years of palace warfare, told her something was amiss. But by the time her suspicions took shape, the inquiry was complete. The evidence wasn't just troubling, it was unforgivable. Her staff, the ones who had once protected her through scandal and shame, had crossed the line from loyalty into treachery. They had not only disrespected Catherine, they had threatened the unity of the monarchy itself, and Anne, protector of order and executioner of tradition, would not let that stand. The findings were damning, and Anne was ready to deliver a royal sentence with no chance of appeal. It happened without warning. One moment, they were sipping tea in the royal drawing room. The next, their badges were deactivated. Anne didn't blink, because this wasn't just discipline, it was war. And the Queen's defenders had just been exiled. The palace, long a fortress of polished appearances and silent betrayals, bore witness to one of its most ruthless purges in recent memory. Anne moved swiftly, methodically. No leaks, no royal memos, just a discreet gathering of the most senior staff, not including Camilla, not even Charles. This was Anne's operation, and she made it very clear that the line had been crossed. 5 names, 5 terminations, and just like that, the royal chessboard changed. Those who had once held the Queen's secrets, who had dared to disregard Catherine in plain sight, found themselves removed with surgical precision. No fanfare, no press coverage, just a private order and a silent escort from the palace grounds. The walls of Windsor didn't echo with shouting, they absorbed the shock in silence, but everyone inside those walls understood the message. For Catherine, the moment was bittersweet. She hadn't demanded revenge, she hadn't raised her voice. But as reports swirled through the inner circle, those close to her revealed the raw truth, she cried. Not for vengeance, not for pride, but for the price of being royal, for how far things had spiraled from grace. Camilla, meanwhile, erupted in fury. Her closest allies were gone, her inner circle shattered. But Charles? He stayed silent. Whether out of caution or complicity, he offered no intervention, no comfort, no defense. And in that silence, Anne's dominance crystallized. A new precedent had been set. This wasn't just about protocol. It was about order, and Anne had drawn a bloody line in the palace sand, one that no staff member would dare cross again. Yet while the royal household settled into this new, tense normal, something darker began to stir. Camilla was no stranger to political warfare, and exile was never the end. For her it was a spark. But in the aftermath, something more dangerous was brewing, because Camilla doesn't take betrayal lightly. She smiled for the cameras, but inside, Queen Camilla was seething. Her inner circle had been gutted, her influence publicly wounded. And if Anne thought she could play power broker unchallenged, Camilla was about to remind the family. She didn't survive this long by playing nice. There's a particular kind of fury that comes from being publicly humiliated, yet forced to maintain composure, and Camilla knew how to weaponize it. The staff may have been removed, but their absence became a battlefield. Slowly, discreetly, Camilla began rebuilding. This time, even tighter, even more loyal. A new set of aides emerged, ones with no past ties to anyone but her. Their allegiance was absolute, and their mission was clear: restore the Queen's standing, quietly but unmistakably. Every calendar reshuffle, every seating arrangement, every invitation list, Camilla's fingerprints were all over them. Those weren't coincidences. They were calculated moves in a silent war. At events, she began arriving separately from Anne. Were cold or skipped altogether. The stiffness wasn't just in posture, it was in principle. Anne's gaze hardened. Camilla's smile thinned. Catherine, meanwhile, became the unwilling hostage between two titans. Her presence, though poised, couldn't mask the tremor behind her eyes. She was the reason this feud had escalated, yet she bore no armor to navigate it. At charity galas and official ceremonies, the energy was unmistakable, tense, fragmented. Royal protocol masks many sins, but the press had learned to read between the gestures. Soon, they began asking questions. Headlines hinted at rifts. Paparazzi zoomed in, on side eyes and seating gaps. The illusion of unity was fraying. What once was a polished institution now resembled a fractured house with competing queens, and while Charles remained visibly distant, the women of Windsor were waging a battle that no crown could conceal. And then came the final blow, a public confrontation that shattered every illusion of royal harmony. They said the royal family never fights in public, but Windsor saw otherwise. In a moment that would never be televised but echoed through every hall, Anne, Camilla, and Catherine clashed with words that were meant to wound and silence. What began as a routine debrief after a ceremonial function spiraled into one of the most volatile confrontations in recent royal memory. The room was sealed, the attendees few, but what was said behind that door would ripple across the monarchy. Anne came armed not with courtesy, but with conviction. Her voice, sharp and controlled, cut through the air as she accused Camilla of recklessness, of allowing her court to behave in ways that not only humiliated Catherine, but undermined the very stability of the crown. Anne didn't mince words. She called it a betrayal, not just of protocol, but of principle. Camilla, red with fury and shaken by the directness of the attack, fired back with equal force. She accused Anne of staging a silent coup, of tearing apart trust that had taken years to rebuild. She spoke of humiliation, of isolation, and of how the family had allowed whispers and headlines to become reality. Then came Catherine, typically composed, ever the diplomat. She couldn't hold it in. With trembling hands and a voice unlike anything they had heard before, she broke her silence not to defend herself, but to plead for peace. She begged them to see what this was doing, not just to her, but to the image they were all meant to protect. For a flicker of a moment, the room fell still. But the damage had been done. Anne, unwilling to concede, turned her back and walked out. Camilla, left breathless and broken, wiped away tears in front of those who once followed her every order, and Catherine stood alone, once again caught in the crossfire of a war she never chose. Outside, senior aides scrambled to contain the aftermath. Doors were locked, phones confiscated. But words spoken in fury have a way of leaking through even the thickest palace walls. But even as the storm passed, the public would soon catch wind, and chaos was about to spill into the press. When confidential memos hit the tabloids, the palace gates couldn't hold back the fury. Suddenly, the world knew everything: the staff firings, the defiance, the Windsor showdown, and for the first time, the royal family was forced to fight its battle under the public spotlight. It began with a single headline, then a cascade. Internal disciplinary records, once sealed tight within the palace's inner walls, found their way into the hands of the press. Leaked emails, unsigned memos, carefully phrased internal briefs, each one pointed to a truth no one was supposed to know. Anne had ordered a silent purge. The Queen's aides had been dismissed not for incompetence, but for defying Catherine. Within hours, media outlets across the globe erupted with speculation. Anonymous aides, once gagged by loyalty or fear, came forward cloaked in secrecy. They painted tales of a fractured firm, of personal agendas, of whispered loyalties turning into full-blown rivalries. And just like that, the monarchy's internal war became a national obsession. Social media split violently. Number Team Camilla trended in furious defense of a queen they saw as cornered and betrayed. But Number Stand with Catherine surged just as hard, fueled by years of public affection and the lingering sympathy attached to a princess who never fought back, only endured. The palace, known for its carefully choreographed silence, stumbled in response. A series of cold, lifeless statements followed, crafted by press secretaries in a panic. Each tried to calm the storm, and each failed. The public knew when words were hollow. Where was Charles? That question echoed across every platform. With his absence growing louder by the day, rumours erupted: illness, retreat, even whispers of abdication. The king was silent, invisible. And silence, in this moment, felt like surrender. Amid the noise, Anne said nothing. She didn't grant interviews. She didn't issue statements. But one sentence leaked by a source close to her office appeared in bold ink across the nation's front pages. Discipline is not cruelty. It wasn't a quote. It was a warning. The firm had been rattled to its core. Trust shattered. Privacy lost. Every glance, every appearance, every absence was dissected like evidence at a trial. The palace had always been a fortress of control, but now it was exposed, vulnerable, and deeply divided. But just when the headlines seemed to be fading, the Queen made a final, unexpected move. She waited. She calculated. And when no one expected it, Camilla made her play. A single royal decree, hidden in charity announcements and formalities, but packed with unmistakable fire. It was subtle, but it was war. After weeks of chaos, silence, and a battered public image, Queen Camilla did not retreat. She recalibrated. Behind closed doors, she began quietly reshaping her household, elevating previously unseen staff into powerful positions, people whose loyalty to her was absolute and unquestioned. These weren't just assistants. They were operatives, placed at critical junctions across the firm, capable of steering decisions, filtering access, and controlling narratives from within. Then, without warning, a familiar face appeared at a public event, one of the aides who had been dismissed in Anne's purge. No press statement, no explanation, just presence. And that presence alone was a declaration. Camilla was reclaiming ground, not with confrontation, but with symbolism. The palace, always so controlled in its optics, now found itself forced to interpret what had once been implicit. And then came the real shock. A new royal engagement announced jointly under the names of Queen Camilla and Princess Catherine. The public was stunned. Was this reconciliation? A truce? Or something more sinister? Those in the know felt the chill before the event even began. At the gathering, the tension was undeniable. Catherine, polished as ever, stood with the poise of a future queen, but her discomfort radiated through every gesture. Camilla, in contrast, was luminous, commanding, almost smug. It wasn't a partnership, it was a performance. And it wasn't for unity, it was for optics. But the sharpest message came not from who was present, but who was absent: Anne. The Princess Royal, whose attendance had been expected, declined entirely. No reasons given, no statement made, but her silence was deafening. It spoke of disapproval, of distance, of a line she refused to cross. The event made headlines around the world, not for its cause, but for what it revealed. The tabloids called it what it was: the Queen's Gambit. A move so elegant in execution, so cloaked in grace, yet dripping with vengeance. Camilla had answered Anne's purge with a resurgence, and she had done so by dragging Catherine into the spotlight she never asked for. But behind the elegance and the royal wave, the firm's balance had shifted once more unsteadily, precariously, and dangerously. And now, the monarchy stands on a knife's edge, because one final twist remains. She was never meant to speak, but the silence had become a scream. In a rare, unscripted moment, Catherine, the future queen, opened her heart, and in doing so, she changed the entire war. The occasion was meant to be simple, a televised interview highlighting a new children's initiative, safe, predictable, carefully vetted. But something shifted mid-broadcast, something no one could have prepared for. As questions danced politely around the topic of motherhood and duty, the interviewer gently touched on the pressures of royal life. And then, the mask cracked. Catherine didn't flinch. She didn't deflect. She leaned in. With composure, masking heartbreak, she spoke not of titles or tiaras, but of what it means to be respected when you're expected only to endure. Sometimes, she said, quietly, respect is harder to earn than a crown. The room went still. The world, watching, sat in stunned silence. Her words, though few, carried the weight of everything she'd endured, every silent snub, every forced smile, every dagger behind a curtsy. The interview continued, but it was that moment that lingered in headlines and hearts. Tens of thousands of messages poured in, not just from supporters in Britain, but from across the globe. Women called her brave. Men called her dignified. The media, once hesitant to choose sides, now found its narrative shifting like a tide. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the reaction was seismic. Camilla, whose resurgence had been so carefully orchestrated, vanished from the public eye. No appearances, no engagements. Her aides offered no comment. Whispers said she had been blindsided. Others insisted she was furious. But none could deny Catherine had won the public. And perhaps more dangerously, she had done it without ever naming names. Behind the walls of Kensington, something remarkable happened. Anne paid a private visit to Catherine. No official record, no press release. What passed between them remains a secret. But what followed spoke volumes. Anne's schedule suddenly aligned with Catherine's. Joint appearances resumed. Smiles no longer looked strained. It was not peace, but it was something close to alliance. And as the royal machine slowly rebooted, the dust of war still clung to its walls. Because while the conflict may have quieted, the wounds had not healed. Power had shifted, alliances had broken, and trust, once shattered, is rarely whole again. But even as this chapter closes, the future of the monarchy may never recover from the scars it now hides. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.